Hello friends. I used to do a lot of self-portraiture when I first started this channel. It was a fun challenge, but in the last 5 years or so, I got bored of it. I mean, I already have to stare at myself every time I edit a video. How much more of me can I take? So I really began focusing more on my outdoor photography and videography, like landscapes and nature and astrophotography. To be able to continue posting videos every week for nearly 12 years, I have to stay true to my passions, right? But it has come time for me to do a new headshot. So I pulled out the lights that I use for my studio videos. They are not only the easiest for me to work with, they are also just really nice for portraits. In this video, I'll share the lights and the other gear I used, how I set up these simple headshots in my studio, and of course some of the photos. Because I know from talking with viewers for over a decade that it can be intimidating to get started with portraiture, and definitely with self-portraiture in the studio. I want this video to demystify the process a bit. And just in case you're new here, my name is Leigh, and like I said, I've been sharing videos every week here on this channel for many years. I talk about anything where you might have a camera in your hand. Subscribe if you like cameras too. And I actually have complete courses as well, including one on classic portraiture. So if after watching this video, you want to learn more from me in a much more in-depth manner, there will be a link in the description to learn more about channel membership. Okay, let's start with the backdrop and move forward. I used a black seamless paper backdrop. This one is from Savage. Not to take us too off track this early in the video, but I do really like these roll paper backdrops because I don't have to iron them, but also because I have gotten pretty creative with them, cutting into them, punching holes. They're very cool. Anyway, black backdrop, and I placed myself 6 or 7 feet away from it. Speaking of me, I chose to stand up for these portraits because that's how I'm the most comfortable, but also because I was running back and forth between my spot in the shot and my camera. More on the camera in just a moment. But my tip here is to make sure you or your subject are comfortable. You'll get better photos that way. But moving on to the lights, I used my Westcott Solix lights with soft boxes on them. I'm using them right now. They are continuous lights that are easy to adjust in terms of power and color temperature. I adore continuous lighting for portraits like this. They also make self-portraiture much easier, which I will come back to in just a moment. I did 2 different setups, first with 2 lights and then with only 1 light. The lights were just around 45-degree angles from me and about 5 or 6 feet away from me. I had the main light on full power, and for the 2 light photos, the fill light was only on about 5% power. Even for these 2 light photos, I wanted a more dramatic lighting look rather than the even lighting that you see in this video where both lights are on full power. Plus, I have daylight coming in through windows when I'm shooting a video typically. Either way, I love softboxes for portraits. They diffuse the light so beautifully, and let's talk about this for just a moment. Harsh lighting can be super cool, and I've certainly played around with that, but these portraits were being created as simple portraits. I wanted a softer look. Plus, I'm 41 years old. I have texture to my skin. Softer lighting simply looks better. So I wanted to achieve a bit of drama, so I went with a low-key look, but I used soft lighting rather than a harsher lighting look. And this boils down to a couple tips. First, use lighting that you like rather than what you heard you should use or what professional photographers use. And also make sure you're playing to your subject's strengths, or rather considering their weaknesses when choosing lighting. On to the camera and lens, plus how I used them. I chose my Leica SL2 and the Sigma 90mm f2.8 DGDN contemporary lens. I was testing that lens at the time, so I did a few shots also with my Sigma 85mm f1.4 DGDN art lens. I love using between like 85 to maybe 100 millimeters or so for portraits like this. And I used the Leica SL2 because I do love the colors out of that camera, but the Leica Photos app is also the easiest to connect and to use of all of the camera brand apps. So I used it on my iPad to get myself set up. I could look at myself in real time, wirelessly tethered, and see how my lighting looked and to get my camera settings just right. And like I said, I'd come back to continuous lighting. This is why I appreciate continuous lighting so much, especially for self-portraits. I was able to see what I had on my iPad screen without having to take a photo. But once I got set up, I turned the app off, I set the camera to interval timer, taking 10 photos in a row, and then I reviewed them on the back of the camera and adjusted from there. So this tip is really, use a camera control app or shoot tethered if you want. I did that for setting up, but I find that using interval timer for a set of shots, then looking at the photos to adjust can be a better process than looking at each photo as it is captured. You get into a better flow that way. And last, let's discuss editing. You can edit yourself or your subject however you want. That's totally a personal preference. I did share in depth how I edited this photo in this week's member feature. I will talk more about that a bit more at the end of this video, but the tips that I want to give you in this video revolve around the process for selecting photos. Because you end up with a lot of photos when you capture self-portraits. Even though I've done this for years and years, I still end up with more photos than I do when I'm capturing someone else's portrait. So my culling process begins with a very quick pass through all of the photos to get rid of the ones that I know aren't good. The key here that I want to emphasize is how quickly I do it. There's no need to stare at a photo that I know I don't like, or that I can see has a little bit of motion blur, or that I was blinking. Those photos don't need to crowd my workspace. And I might do this process several times, going a bit slower each time, but with each pass through, I understand how many usable photos I have. And I begin to lose that anxiety that I'm sure we all feel of, did I get enough? Are any of these any good? And that makes it easier to finally select the photos that you want to use. Really, I've gotten pretty ruthless with that first pass. I reject them in Lightroom or whatever software I'm using, and I know the files aren't actually going to go anywhere. If I feel the need to pull some files back in because I was a little too ruthless, that's fine. But that rarely happens. I've found that trusting my gut on that first pass saves me a ton of time. So my biggest tip when it comes to editing is to narrow down your choices quickly, trusting your gut, because it will save you a ton of time in stressing over the photos that didn't work. So the portraits were pretty simple, but of course we all know that the process isn't so simple. Even using continuous lights and having experience, portraits are, well, they're a process. Hopefully this video has demystified that process for you a bit. If you are still looking for gear, I do have videos on pretty much all of the gear that I used in this self-portrait session. So I will link to those videos in the description below, along with a link to learn more about channel membership. Remember, my members do see my complete courses. I actually just added one on nature photography, but I do also have one on classic portraits like I captured today. And my members also see weekly member feature videos. I mentioned a few minutes ago that this week the member feature video was me editing one of these portraits so that you can see how quickly I edit a portrait, how simple it can be. But that's all for this video. Please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And thank you for watching.